Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today with your MAPS coach, Chris Suarez. Today we're going to do the intro to Model Your Way to a Million. He's pulling up the PowerPoint right now. We apologize for the few minute delay. He was actually on one of his coaching calls and we jumped over to this. So thank you so much for your patience. This webinar will be recorded, and you will be sent this recording shortly after the webinar today. Please feel free to share this recording with anyone in your market center that you may find of interest. If you have any questions for Chris, please type those into the questions box located in your taskbar in the webinar. Taskbar. And following this webinar, if you have any questions, please email us fasttrack@kw.com. So that's all for me, Chris. The PowerPoint looks good, so let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much for setting it up, and thanks for the couple-minute delay as I transitioned from my last call. Really excited about being here with everybody, and here's why. Because if I can point to one thing that changed the trajectory of my business and then ultimately how that affected my life, it is the book that you see on your screen if you're in front of a computer. It is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. Really the course Model Your Way to a Million, and what I will tell you is over the next 30, 40, 45 minutes that we'll spend together, I'm going to share sort of my biggest takeaways from this book, regardless of whether you join us on the journey of really deep diving into the book or not. But my perspective on how to run a real estate business was dramatically changed and shifted once I really dove into implementing the book and not just reading it. Here's what we know. We know that 1 million people have this book, and we know that there are very few real estate agents that have ever gone out and actually, net $1 million in residential real estate. I'll share just my beginning story, and the reason why is because it will give you a secret on what it takes to be able to implement the models in this book. They're very, very simple, and it's just not easy to do. They're very, very simple, and it's just hard work to do. And I think what I found early on in my career, where I found this book in a bookstore, and I was at another company, and I was committed, and I was a hard worker, and I was convinced that I could build my business around these systems and models, and this was the best way to run a real estate business and a real estate team and a real estate company. And yet day in, day out, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen because I didn't have a community, or quite honestly, a systematic approach to implementing the models in the order they needed to be implemented in. And so fast forward, and Keller Williams found or interacted with me, found me, and I found myself in a team leader role, which is an interesting role to be in as your first role within this company. And the only thing I knew was that, well, the company is built around the Red Book, so I'll just study the Red Book, I'll teach the Red Book, I'll coach the Red Book, and I'll recruit to the Red Book. And that became a 2-year journey of really building an office around this Red Book. And what I always told agents that I connected with and I talked to is this. I asked them a question. Do you believe that you'll be selling real estate 5 years from today? Do you have 5 years left? And most people said yes, right? I had a few people that said no, but most people said yes. So I told them that if you believe that you're going to be selling real estate 5 years from today, then there's no one in this industry that couldn't net $1 million if they wanted to and follow this model and follow this system. So for 2 years, that's what I coached. I coached these models. And one day the OP of the office came to me and said, hey, Chris, the office has grown. We went from 50 agents to 100 agents, which, in today's world is not great growth, but whatever. And he came to me and said, would you model it? Would you get back into production and model MREA? And I have to be honest, I took a step back and said, well, let me think through that, because I knew one thing and one thing only, that it is a lot easier to coach than to do. I'm going to just say that. It's a lot easier to coach a model than to do the model. And I had sat in front of 100 agents or 110 agents or whatever the number was at that time and said that this is the system, these are the models, and it's simple. And it's simple. So I said yes. And I knew that there were going to be 200 eyeballs watching what I did. And that's the secret. The secret is this, that I didn't have the opportunity, I didn't have the luxury, I didn't have the right to do anything other than the systems and models in the book. So 3 years later, not 5, but 3 years later, we net our first $1 million as a residential real estate agent. And I've done that for the last 5 years straight, growing each year. Why? Because we understand that it is models, that they are the systems. And Gary Keller says this, and it's one of my favorite quotes in the entire book. Gary says that there are basically, right, there are 3 very simple things that will stand between us and success in this industry. And I share this before we even get going. On page 22 of MREA, Gary said, your approach, your ability, and your willingness to do the work of a real estate salesperson will be the greatest determining factor for your success. Now think about that. My intention and my goal over our 10-week program is to change approach and to improve ability. In fact, we could do that today. Like, you give me a few hours and I promise you our approach can change and our ability can improve. And the only thing I have zero control over is willingness. So as I jumped into my journey of MREA, what I realized is I had to be willing to change my approach, because I had sold real estate 6 or 7 years prior to coming to Keller Williams and prior to implementing MREA. So when I looked at that, my approach had to change. I had to be focused on improving my ability, but more than anything, I had to be willing to do the work. And I would say this, if we're writing 3 words down and putting those in front of us over the course of the next 10 weeks together, it's approach, be willing to change it. Ability, be willing to improve it. And willingness, be honest. Be honest, am I willing to do the work of a real estate salesperson? Because those 3 things will stand between us and success. Now on page 26 of MREA, this is what I love. Gary said, no one can live in complexity for very long. And as he interviewed top agents from around the country and from different companies as well, he said lasting success always lied in their ability to reduce things to their simplest form. So as I looked at that and I read MREA and read MREA and read MREA, I went to Maps and said, here's where our problem is. We have this very, very simple model, yet all of us are complicating it. All of us are struggling with executing the model because there's, I don't know, 348 pages to get through. And most of us either start on 150 and read to 200 or start on 1 and read to 40. Like, we just don't have a very simple approach to executing those models or implementing those models. On page 27 of MREA, Gary said, if it isn't simple, it's complicated. Right? If it isn't simple, it's complicated. And then he said this, and there's no judgment in this, but he said, it is unlikely that the majority of us, including the majority of us on this call, right, will take something very complicated and make it work. However, we do that well as agents. In fact, we took MREA and have complicated it for the decade that it's been out. Gary said on page 27 that if we seek simple answers to complex questions, that those simple answers would allow us to take action. So my conversation with Maps is, we have a very simple model. We just need to explain it in a very simple way and allow people to implement these models sequentially in their business. Sequentially in their business, such that those models will drive growth and success, as opposed to us trying to drive success through growth. And Gary talks a lot about that. You heard him say that multiple times on Family Reunion if you were there this year. So what does that look like? It looks like modeling. At the end of the day, it looks like modeling. Now, there's a picture up on your screen, and it's of a runway, right? And here's what I realized. We look at her, or we look at him, if it was a him on the screen, and say, well, that's a model. And why? It's because as we look at them, we say, well, if I wore that dress, I would look like that. And then you put it on, you realize you don't. And so you said, okay, well, if I did my hair like her, I would look like her. And so now you have the dress on, your hair, and you still don't. And then you realize, well, oh, you know what? It's the makeup. So if I do my makeup like her, so now I have my dress on, I have my hair done, I have my makeup on, and I still don't look like her. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I just have to stop eating for a couple years and then I'll look like her. The reality is they're called a model because we look at that individual and convince ourselves that that's what we want. Now, that has we could talk about that and the issues with models for days. But my point is we have to look at our business the same way. The same way. Gary Keller says modeling is the pathway to excellence. In fact, he quotes Tony Robbins in Unlimited Power that Tony Robbins says that success leaves clues, that people that received certain or specific results did specific activities. So Gary said, if that's the case, well, I'm just going to go back into the industry. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to interview all the agents that you and I just were too lazy, right? Myself included. Like I was too insecure to interview those agents. I didn't want to bother people. I just didn't interview them. Gary did. Gary went into the industry and said, hey, you're highly successful. You've been successful for a long time. You're netting $1 million in real estate. What are you doing? And he put together what he calls the Frankenstein of best practices of those businesses. So why would we do anything other than that? If we have a paint by number, or if we have a piece by piece explanation on how to build a business, why have we not opened up to page 1? Gone to page 2, gone to page 3, turned to page 4. Here's why. Because it's simple, just not easy. We have complicated the process of building a big business. On your screen, you'll see the quotes from Tony Robbins' books, right? The Unlimited Power. Long ago, I realized that success leaves clues. That people who produce outstanding results do specific things to create those specific results. What we realized is we needed a box to open and for us to be coached through what are those specific things. What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? How does my economic model layer into my lead generation model? How does that lead generation model then force me to build the budget model? And how does that budget model dictate what my organizational model looks like? Actions are the source of all results. To model excellence, we need to be a detective, right? Someone who asks lots of questions and tracks down all the clues. Well, I don't know about you, but that's not necessarily my normal perspective or my personality. And yet what I realized is I had someone that went ahead of me and before me to ask all those questions of agents that were highly successful, to then implement and write down what were the next steps. So in Model Your Way to $1 Million, that's why it's called that, because we are going to model the activities and the steps that it takes to get there. Now, what's the first step? Interestingly enough, the actual models don't start until page 129, I believe. So Gary used 129 pages of real estate before he ever started talking about, well, what is the economic model? What are those first 129 pages? I like to call it the 5th model, which is the mindset model. In fact, as a doer, for the first few years that I had the book, what did I do? I skipped pages 1 through 29 and went straight to, hey, okay, so what do I do? How do I implement? What's the next step? And what I didn't realize is as Gary interviewed top agents, we have to think a certain way as well. I just hopped off a call around open houses at Lead Gen Lever, and we went through the 9 ways the MREA thinks. Why? Why, if we're talking about open houses, do we talk about the 9 ways the MREA thinks? Because if we don't make this thought process or this thought system or model our model, then that first step is missed. And so we'll go deep into the 9 ways the MREA thinks, starting with the first foundational one, think powered by a big why. Yeah, we say that a lot, but how do we systematically think that way? How do we change what we do around it? The second foundational way is think big goals and big models. Here's what I'll say. I believe everybody on this call probably has some big goals, right? If you didn't, you would never show up to a webinar called Model Your Way to $1 Million, right? Because $1 million is a pretty big goal. Where we fall off is that we just don't have the big models to support the big goals. And we get we get disenchanted with our goals because we relive page 39 of MREA, which is that breaking through higher achievement, right? We hit that wall and we realize that, well, we're not even close to our goal. And so our mindset shifts. Why? Because we didn't understand the foundational way the MREA thinks is think big goals and big models. We can't have just one, we need both of them. Interestingly enough, the next 7 ways that Gary realized as he interviewed agents, the next 7 ways that they thought were supportive. Supportive to the first 2. Thinking possibilities, thinking action, thinking without fear, thinking progress, thinking competitively and strategically, thinking standards, and thinking service. Here's what I'll say. We go deep into each one of these in our first week on the call. But more than anything, I look at number 4 and think action. And one of my favorite sections of MREA is Gary said, here's your problem, right? And when I say your, I mean mine. Gary said, here's your problem. The problem for most agents is we assemble everything we need to pursue success. And then instead of actually pursuing it, we decide to think about it some more. Not think action, but just think about it some more. He said, we hide behind continual inaction while calling it something altogether. Additional research, planning, preparation. Here's how we know that's true. Because every single one of us on the call has the red book. But not every single one of us on the call has our economic model built out, our lead generation model built out, our budget model built out, our organization model built out, right? We get caught up in the preparation, the planning, the research, and we hide behind all that, which is straight up procrastination. Now, the other one I think is interesting is thinking competitively and strategically. And I love this because if you do, everybody will know. I will share that our Model Your Way to a Million community has changed the way people think, and they show up in their market centers thinking competitively and strategically. Why? Well, because the book is a competitive and strategic guidebook on how to build a real estate business and a real estate career. So this will adjust. People in your market center, people around you will see a difference, and they should. Stephen Covey in 4 Disciplines of Execution talks about this a lot, and he says this: people know, people can tell if you think competitively and strategically. Just think about whether, imagine yourself in a house, right? You're in a house and you go up to the window, the front window, and you look, and about 100 yards out, there are 4 people playing basketball, right? Just a single hoop, they're playing basketball. Can you tell if they're keeping score? 100% yes. In fact, if they weren't keeping score and they start to keep score, you immediately can tell. Why? Because they pass faster, they run faster, they jump higher, right? They shoot more accurately. Like it is a fact. The minute we start looking at our business and we get focused and following a model, we will think competitively and think strategically, and everything else around us will change as well. Now, my favorite of the 9 ways the MRA thinks is number 8 and 9, and here's why. Because I was a guy that used to believe that, well, my standards will slide as I grow. My service won't be as good as I grow. Why? Because I was my standards and I was my service. And as we go through the lead gen model and turn those into levers together, and as we go through our budget model and understand what money we should be investing in standards and service, what you will realize very, very quickly is the big agents, those big businesses, can deliver higher standards and better service. In fact, my standards and service couldn't keep up with those around me that were following the MRA model because they were investing in standards and service at a budget level that I couldn't compete with. So I love these 9 ways. And remember, these aren't some ideas that Gary came up with. Well, this is the way you need to think. No, these are the 9 ways that Gary realized were common threads in the mindset of the agents that had big businesses. Now, what's the difference between mindset and perspective? Perspective is pretty broad, right? My mindset is this is how I show up every morning and this is how I think. My perspective will change as well. One of my favorite parts of our 10-week program is to really go through and define the 6 personal perspectives. And the reason being is these 6 personal perspectives are game changers if in fact our perspective matches MREA's perspectives. And I challenge all of us that we may say that they do. We may say that that is our perspective, right? One of the greatest courses that Keller Williams ever delivered to us was those 6 personal perspectives. And we'll spend a half of a week session on those 6 personal perspectives and talking about how do we model those perspectives in our business. With that said, the MREA book clearly defines what it is we should be tracking. What are the, well, ultimately, right, what are the 8 goal categories of the millionaire real estate agent? And what I found early on, even in my business, because I skipped page 101 to 129 and went straight to the models, that until I systematize these 8 goal categories, right? Leads generated, listings, contracts written, contracts closed, money, people, systems, and personal education. It's on page 109, so you don't have to write those down. But as I systematize page 109 of MREA, my business got some incredible clarity. Well, what's so interesting is they're all on page 109, and right, systems in place from 109 to about 116-ish of MREA. And so we'll go through, how do we set up those 8 goal categories? How do we track those 8 goal categories? How do those goal categories become metrics in our business to be able to help us to sit above the business almost as a marionette and pull strings on our business in a very strategic and systematic way, so we can step out of the production of our business even for a moment and look at those goal categories, hold ourselves accountable to those goal categories, and build systems around it. It's a simple, just a few pages in MREA, and oftentimes we sort of slide by it, but it's a foundational truth to running a phenomenal business that we'll break down together. One of my favorite sections, page 169 of MREA, and here's why. Because I look at my business, and realize that for the first 6 or 7 years, I was a hard worker. I have, those of you who know me know I came from a long line of workers, and that is a gift as well as a curse. And Gary in MREA shared his thought on this concept of work to learn versus work to earn. What I will share is this: if you've been in the business for a year, you know what your ceiling of achievement is. If you've been in the business for 6 or 7 or 10, or I know some people on the call have been in the business for 15 years and they're thinking, well, I'm stuck. Like I do my business, I run my business the way that I run it. Our industry has done us a disservice, and here's why. Because most of us got our license in about 60 days. Some of us on the call, I bet 30 days, right? I shared this session at Family Reunion for about an hour last week, and we had someone that had completed their licensing in about 3 weeks flat. What does that mean? Their work to learn phase was about 3 weeks. And then what happened? Our company gets us into production fast. Yes, it is easy to make money in real estate, right? Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but I promise you, following a model, it is easy to make money in real estate, and that is a detriment to us. Why? Because we go through a 30-day work to learn phase, and then we jump in and work to earn. And we find a buyer very quickly, or we connect with the seller, and maybe it's our friend, and we put it on the market and it sells, and 45 days later we get the biggest check we ever received in our lives, right? If we came from 9 to 5, that check is the biggest check we've probably ever received. So what do we want to do? We just want to do it again, right? It's a rinse and repeat cycle. So we go immediately into work to earn. Whereas any other field, right, doctors and attorneys and accountants, they have a work to learn phase. Of doctors, it's 12 years, right? It's undergrad, it's grad, it's medical school, it's residency. They're in education working to learn 12 years before they ever get the right to practice medicine. And we're out practicing real estate in about 30 days. And that is a disservice to all of us. And what I realized is, I shared that I started as a team leader. The reason why that was the greatest gift that anyone ever gave to me is because I had a 2-year work to learn phase, right? The company pours into their leaders. Keller Williams team leaders are some of the best educated business coaches and business developers ever. I would have never done that. I would have never committed to understanding MREA if I wasn't forced / paid to work to learn. So my mission in going to MAPS and saying, hey, we need a course around MREA is this. I know that we're not going to take a year off or 2 years off or a 4-year education in MREA. But what if we could create a 10-week program that forces people or invites people invites people to work to learn. I will tell you that work to learn phase of 2 years, understand in my 3rd year after executing on the work to learn phase, you do realize that I generated more profit than I did in the 7 years before. What does that mean? Working to learn creates exponential income. And I promise you that at the end of our 10-week program, you have gone through a work to learn phase. I will tell you, it's not a sit and listen course. It is a working fast track course. We will implement models. We will put systems in place. We will build that together around this community of work to learn. It's one of the most important phases or parts of the book, but often a part that gets forgotten, that we have to focus on this work to learn phase. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn about the economic model. Very simple model, right? How do we earn $1 million? How do we net? And maybe that's not your net goal. Maybe it's 500, maybe it's 250, maybe it's just 100, maybe it's, right? It doesn't, maybe it's 2 million. It's irrelevant, but we will build an economic model together such that that economic model gives us insights into what we need to accomplish. At the end of the day, the only reason why to develop an economic model is to get very, very clear on how many appointments our business needs to go on. Not you, but our business needs to go on. And from that, we're going to ask ourselves one question and one question only. If I'm going to net $1 million around appointments, then how do I get those appointments, right? And the only way we get appointments is by lead generating. At the end of the day, our business needs to answer the question of appointments, and we answer that question with the lead generation model. Now, here's our weakness. We talk about lead generation all the time in this company, right? It started a few years ago, and I thank Gary for that. We started with an hour a day of lead gen. Somewhere along the line, it went to 2 hours a day. Somewhere along the line, it went to 3 hours a day. At some point, I think it might have turned to 5 hours a day of lead generation. And what happens? We check out. Why? Because it became complicated, not simple. Here's the problem with our activity. It's just that. It's lead gen activity. We're doing the activity over again and over again and over again. And actually, some of us are getting better at it as we do it. Some of us are not, but some of us are. And as we get better at it, we just do the activity again and again and again instead of actually creating a model. We need to turn that lead generation activity into a model. So in one of the weeks of our course, we go through how do we build a lever? How do we take one of the models that we've created in our business here in Portland and now in I think 23, 24 different cities, how do we take that and put it into our business? We'll go through the outline of creating a lever, turning activity into a model. Why? Because Gary and MREA says our database is our business, right? Building up the number of names in it and the relationship with those names is really right at the very core of what building a real estate business is all about. But here's the deal. We need to realize that our mission in our lead generation model is adding names to the model and building a relationship with those names. It's not one or the other, it's both. And so we need to make sure that we're creating a funnel of leads, but also creating a system to develop relationships. Now, what happens when we do? We're going to sell some real estate. In fact, we're going to sell a lot of real estate. And that's where this budget model comes in. I will confess that my favorite model is the budget model. And it didn't start out that way. And here's why. Because as we look at that budget model, and we look at the cost of sale, and we look at our operating expenses, what we don't realize is every one of us has a budget. We just might not realize what it is. Our business is operating on a budget. The best probably have a profit and loss statement, right? Where does the income come from and where does the income go? But ultimately, what we're going to do is build out a budget. And once we build out a budget, what you'll realize is the budget becomes the greatest accountability tool that we could have in our business if we understand it. And it will also answer questions about every step of our business. So for instance, page 157 of MREA, one of my favorite pages in the book, because I don't care where you are in your business, whether you're on your way to 5 million in production, 10 million in production, 15, 16 million in production, 25 million in production, 40 million in production, the budget model tells us what should we invest, who should we invest in, when should we invest it. Those are the questions we always have in building our business. Like, should I spend money there? Should I invest this money here? Like, when should I make my first hire? Interestingly enough, it's not the organizational model that tells us that. It's the budget model. So we'll understand how to lay down that budget, build the budget finally together. We'll spend a couple weeks on the budget, but your perspective on what that budget is and what that budget is for will change dramatically. Which naturally, if we have a budget, because we had to, because we were selling real estate, the budget model will force us into an organizational model. Now, you might be saying, yeah, but Chris, I don't want a team. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter. The budget model will tell you where your organization may need to grow or where you would choose it to grow. And maybe it's not a team of agents. Maybe it's just an administrative organization or an operational organization. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the budget model will force us to build the organizational model. We will learn how all four of those models interact like you have never seen before, and ultimately how simple they are. Our work to learn phase is a couple months of a commitment of 1 hour a week. And I will tell you that it has changed people's trajectory in their business once they understood that the model is there, it's simple, we just need to keep it simple. What I have found, and this is an MREA right at the end, is business is an art and a science. The art is the motivation and inspiration. This is what Gary says. The art of your business is your motivation and inspiration. I can't touch that, and neither can anybody else but you. If you are motivated and you are inspired around your business, then that is the art of your business, and it's going to be phenomenal. What I will say is some people will look at art and say, well, I don't like it. And other people will look at art and say, I think it's amazing. And that's the beauty of running individual businesses and being the entrepreneur. That's your art. No one can motivate or inspire you. In fact, if you think that other people do, be careful, right? Because a lot of times we will show up reading motivational book after motivational book after motivational book. And at a certain point in time, we just need to wake up and realize, well, maybe I'm just an unmotivated person. The motivation and inspiration for your business is the art of your business. The science, no one's arguing with science. Why? Right? Because we've formed a hypothesis around what might be true and what might not be true. We've run an experiment. We've reviewed the results and we've formed conclusions. MREA is the science of our business. You will apply your creativity and your art to the science of a business. The problem is oftentimes we just start with art and we never have the art applied to the science. Our program is the science of what building a business is all about. So, how do you sign up? Go to modelyourway.com. Our course begins next week, and it's 1 hour a week. They're live calls, and it's $99 for the 2.5 months. So it's $99 a month. But go to modelyourway.com. It'll bring you directly to the MAPS group page. And that MAPS group page will actually give you some more information about the course. There's a video that I shot just briefly describing the course, but here's what I will share with you. Here's what I will share. My mission is in this organization, in this company, is to get people to look at this book and get people to look at the models in this book differently than we've looked at them in the past decade. And here's why. Because if we can apply them to our business in a very simple way, whether we want to net $1 million, whether we want to net $500,000, whether we want to net $100,000, what we know is if we apply simple theory and simple activities to our business, we will spend our life taking action and we will not allow it to get complicated. That is why I think this is probably the 15th or 16th time through Model Your Way to $1 Million. And it's a small group, I will tell you. I encourage you to join this small group of people that are committed to building around this model, because I look at where my business and life is, and the life's mission now gets to be lived because the business model was there first. Questions around our course, questions around anything that we discussed, questions about the model. I believe if you type them in, Paige, you'll be able to see them. I can't see them on my screen, but you can read them if there happen to be any. Okay, there may not be questions. So go to Model Your Way. It'll bring you to the MAPS coaching page. It is 10 10 weekly calls, 1 hour a week. They are live. They will be uploaded as well. You'll be invited to a base camp, which is basically a platform where we will be uploading our systems and our models along the way, week over week. It's a working fast track course. Total cost is about $297, which is $99 a month for the course. But please, if you have questions, reach out to me. Many of you I've met, I've talked to. You may have come to our program at Family Reunion as well. But our goal is to create this community of people focused on building their business around the models. And along the way, if you have questions before the course begins, which is next week, if you have questions around that course, it begins next Tuesday, March 6th, and will run every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Please just reach out to me, even on Facebook, with questions, and I'm happy to answer those as we go. Cool? Any other questions, Paige, that you can see online? And Paige may be muted, so you may just have me. All right, guys. Thanks for being part of the call. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, whether you're part of our community or not, you got something out of this session, this 45 minutes we've spent together. What I will say is dive into the book. Grab that copy. Even if you don't join the community, please begin reading it again and applying it to your business, and you will see exponential growth and exponential income because of it. Thanks for being committed, and thank you all to those that are signing up and being part of our community moving forward next week. Thanks, guys.